Hello, welcome to the C50 podcast.
Jay, Becca, Bella, and myself all know that mental health is important, and those sitting around this table are either diagnosed with a mental illness or support someone who is.
If you're anything like us, you may be listening to this while you drive, work, clean, or you could be doing many other things. We would encourage you to visit www.c50hope.com, where you can follow up with our podcast and get more help.
We have worked hard to build C50 into a ministry that can reach those affected by someone's struggle with mental health and a deeper illness. We believe that a relationship with Christ is key in finding hope. However, we're not professionals. Think on our words, process them, but never consider us more important than a doctor or therapist you may be working with. We would love to recommend professionals that value all your needs, including medication and therapy, and will also point to Jesus Christ as the center of your life and the way for healing and taking you from hurt to hope.
There are a lot of people that give to C50 that make this all possible. We have people praying, many that give financially, people that donate time or space.
And as an example, we've found a home for the C50 podcast, generously donated for us at McQueen Builders in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, PA. Let's call this McQueen Studios, and this is where we pick up today.
All right, welcome to McQueen Studios again, and we're glad you're listening. You've tuned in, and you may have just heard about C50 because we just launched the website last week, and we put up the podcast. We started out with the podcasts. We started with My Story, I'm Jay. It was a two-part story leading into what C50 is about. Then we got into Bella, and by the time we have this, we will have Lorraine's story up, and that'll be another good one for you. But today we have my wife here. She's a part of the four folks that sit around this table, and she's a part of C50 and a big part of C50. In fact, what I like to think about is she's the other half of C50.
Aw, how cute.
Well, not because like, oh, that's sweet, which is cool. It's because really she's had to put up with me for so long that that's like a part of the story of mental health, I think, and definitely with my mental illness. Becca, just dealing with that. She was dealing with this long before I was addressing it and whatnot. So we're going to get into her story. Becca, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Glad to be here.
I'm talking again. Nobody else.
It's all about Jay.
It's all about Jay.
Not today. Today's about Becca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Beck, you're here to let us know about your story. It's not maybe what you call mental illness, or maybe some of the things that you might not have even heard of this. Bella, you're shaking your head over there because you're going, I think I just learned about it 10 minutes ago, because this is something that has kind of flown under the radar. But as you know more about it, I think a lot of people will start to go, whoa, like I might.
Right, like that's me. Oh my gosh, I think I have some of the same signs or tendencies or what have you. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
and with codependency, it was originally identified in the relationship between an alcoholic and then the person who enabled the alcoholic. And then now they transfer that term to also use someone with a behavioral addiction, a mental illness within the behavioral category, not just a chemical addiction. So you have that person on one side, and then you have the person with codependency on the other side, and they can fit into this dysfunctional cycle if they're operating in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there's different degrees.
Right.
With mental health, there's different degrees of it. So this could be a big area in your life that you need to address, or something that you're going to learn about, and just going to kind of make you aware of some of your tendencies, the way that you lean and what you do. So today's gonna be really cool, and we're gonna get into the definition and go further into that. But first, we need to go back to the very beginning, a long time ago in Cedarville, Ohio.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cedarville, Ohio, same as you. Jay and I grew up on different ends of the same street, born in the same hospital in Xenia. I had a loving family and felt very supported growing up, but I did experience trauma. When I was 9 years old, my dad died unexpectedly in an explosion.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was...
like at work or...
Yeah, it was at work. It was at Cedarville University. It was a water tower explosion.
wow.
He was on the
Wow.
job.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that was nearly unbearable, except for the Lord's grace just sustaining us day to day, week to week. And my grandpa Ira, I remember at the time, had me memorize a verse, Psalm 68:5, which says that God's a father of the fatherless and a defender of the widow. I remember making that into a song even just as a little girl, and just learning to trust God as my father. So then my mom remarried 3 years later, and it actually took me many years to appreciate my stepdad. When I was 27 and had a 2-year-old, I wrote him a note on Father's Day and told him that I loved him and that I wanted him to be my dad, and I wanted to call him Dad. So that was, I finally realized how he had sacrificed for us and loved us. And having a son myself, I realized that it's okay to have two dads. My dad that was with the Lord in heaven, and my stepdad.
That had to mean so much to him.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
So like we heard in Jay's story, like we're hearing in yours right now, you and Jay knew each other for a very long time. So knowing each other and going to school with each other, how did you guys eventually end up together is what I'm wondering.
So we started dating in college. I remember one summer I had a tandem bike, and he would stop over at my apartment and we would ride the tandem bike around.
Okay, I so have a visual right now of the two of you on this bike.
I was on the front.
Which means he was dependent on my strength.
Yeah. That's where the codependency started. Yeah.
So we dated for about a year, actually exactly a year, and then got engaged. We're engaged for 4 months and then got married halfway through my senior year of college.
Oh, so you guys got married while you were you both still in college? Or?
Well, my education's a little bit weird.
All right.
Becca did the typical 4 years, and so I was a year ahead of her, but I was still taking classes and whatnot.
Gotcha. Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. So when we got married, zoning in on kind of the highs and lows, Jay wasn't diagnosed with bipolar or borderline at that point, but I did notice distinct highs and lows of his. But within my codependency, I never was very vulnerable about that, or I was just always in fixing mode, wanting to make it better. If he was facing a time of depression, which for him meant sleeping a lot or just sitting on the ground, not really in touch.
So if I could ask a question.
Sure.
So because some people out there may be listening, and you know, you guys obviously, you got married young, so you were a senior in college. So are you, when your whole codependency got started, were you thinking, okay, I'm married to Jay's struggling, I love Jay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, did you think as a wife, this is the role that you were supposed to have?
Yeah. I think even coming from a Christian background, we just feel like the most loving thing is to make the other person feel okay. So I just felt like I was always in that mode of wanting to help, wanting to fix, and basically shaping myself into whatever mold was needed in order to help Jay feel okay. And I felt that was something I was naturally good at, a natural caretaker. But yes, that had always been a part of me.
I love how you stated that, because I think that is so true. I think as Christians, you're right. I mean, at a very young age, if you grew up in a Christian household, you're taught to, always forgive, love, be kind, put others before yourself.
And you never know where the line is.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. You need to have a healthy balance.
Right. And for me, there was no line, that sense of where I end and Jay begins. But it wasn't just in the things that looked loving. It was in my controlling tendencies or overcompensating. But I really was in denial. I couldn't see it in myself. So I knew that Jay had highs and lows, and that I wouldn't have been able to say at the time that he had mental health issues, but I knew he struggled with depression. But as far as my issue, I couldn't see it at the time.
So would you say you were kind of defining who you were by how well you were able to help Jay?
Yes, in ways, and even others in general. I think I majored in social work, kind of the classic helping profession. And I did find value in that, and in keeping the people around me happy. And I did find my identity in that.
I can't even imagine how hard this must have been for you as a newlywed, especially as being so young and not knowing that what you're doing is wrong in a way.
Yeah, it was. And I really couldn't see it. I noticed that Jay had been struggling with some self-harm, and I saw some of those marks on his arm. And so I remember just scheduling a doctor's appointment with our family doctor, and literally just driving him there and talking to the doctor about it. And that's when Jay got on antidepressants for the first time. But since it was a family physician and not a psychiatrist, they didn't think about the impact that might have for someone with bipolar and the potential manic effects that could have of being on a really high dosage of an antidepressant.
Because at that point, then
I didn't even
Was that affects her?
think
was,
about that.
so then you weren't diagnosed. So you didn't even know about the whole bipolar thing at this point?
No.
Okay, all right.
That was probably about 6 to 9 months before you were diagnosed.
Yeah, so that was, you give somebody with bipolar an upper, and
You're buying lots of puppies.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, things go a little bit crazy.
Think about that. Wow.
In 2007, I was in survival mode. I was waking Jay up every day for work, which I saw as his issue as opposed to mine for doing that. Doing all the chores and feeling the weight of our home responsibilities, caring for our 2-year-old son, and just basically barely keeping my head above water. And that year I faced some deep pain, but as usual, I continued living a lie, just acting like my life was fine and wearing a mask, while under the surface I was going through unbearable emotional struggles, but I continued to smile and just overcompensate and restabilize our unstable relationship.
So do you think you were depressed at this point in your life, or?
No, I haven't really struggled with depression.
Okay.
I just struggle with being vulnerable with people about what's really going on. So I would just, really, it felt like just wearing a mask. That idea of...
you had to be just exhausted of playing this role.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of high schoolers or people that are in school right now listening to that can really resonate with that, because I feel like if you go to a school, if you feel like you need to fit into a certain group and people feel like they need to wear that mask, and I bet it can be exhausting.
Yeah. And I wasn't even being honest with myself. So it's not that I necessarily, I hadn't faced what was going on. And I feel like denial can be a major hurdle to healing, and that really healing can't begin until denial is dealt with. And for me, that didn't happen for another 10 years. So when Jay was diagnosed with bipolar and borderline, I was still in denial that I had any problems. I couldn't see it. Codependency is basically needing someone else to be okay, is what a licensed therapist I know, how she defines it. And it's driven by the agreement that I work harder on your life and your problems than you do, as defined by the relationship recovery.
Okay, so not to interrupt you.
No,
so
thank
just
you.
just so I understand, and maybe some other people out there can understand a little bit better. So, do you feel like these, I'm going to say personality traits, and maybe they're not okay, but do you feel like these different traits, or how you were acting? Did you ever notice these things, say, prior to even meeting Jay? Like, you had some of these tendencies growing up, or was this something, I met Jay, my life is now helping and being everything Jay needs me to be. When do you feel like maybe this all began for you?
Yeah, I feel like it's rooted in dealing with the tragedy of my dad's death and being the oldest of 4, and really, within codependency, it tends to be someone's strength, being empathetic towards others, being compassionate, but then to an extreme, it can be detrimental both for the person who's codependent and for the person that they're in that unhealthy relationship with. So there are seeds of it, but that's been the primary unhealthy dynamic of our relationship. So that's where it was seen most because of Jay's mental illness. It drew out those characteristics in me.
I feel like your story is so amazing because I feel like there's going to be so many people out there that can relate and understand, or maybe had points in their life where they were you. And I just really feel like I've never really known that much about this. And this is just opening my eyes up to a whole other, I think there's a lot of people out there that can understand and relate to this without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah.
Thinking about how many people out there listening that, as you had initially said, codependency initially was talked about people that were married or know somebody that was an alcoholic or maybe addicted to drugs. But this could be somebody that's in an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
And they're either mentally or physically abused. This could be a support person such as yourself for somebody that, a parent even, or a husband or a wife of somebody that's diagnosed with a mental illness. There are so many people I feel that can really respond and understand and relate to what you're talking about today, Becca.
Karen, you brought up something really big too, because there's even one more. You listed a bunch of those, but Bella, this is along your lines that codependency can show up in students or with a child. Codependency can show itself with a child-parent relationship too, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, codependency can really show up anywhere where someone isn't recognizing what is their responsibility and what is someone else's responsibility, and they are feeling more responsible for other people's.
So are you saying, Jay, from
Sorry,
okay, Jay? So are you saying though, from a parent-child, it could go both ways if I'm understanding this correctly. It could be a parent trying to be everything for their child, but could also be a young child who maybe has an abusive parent that's trying to fill all of that for their parent.
That's the unhealthy dynamic. That's a parent with a mental health struggle, or definitely with a chemical dependency, where the child is used to overcompensating or meeting the needs of the parent. So that's where a child gets comfortable in a role of, really, it's an adult type role, but they get comfortable meeting needs and basing their decisions on what other people want from them, and that can carry into their adult relationships as well.
And that's what is so huge, and how we talked about earlier, say in Bella's podcast or maybe even in Jay's podcast, getting recognizing some of these things that are going on and recognizing some of these symptoms and getting with a therapist or talking with somebody and understanding yourself at an early age is huge.
Absolutely.
Because then you're right. It just does. It carries over into your adult life and then affects other relationships.
Right. And when you're in denial and you can't see it, then you can't deal with it. So that's the first step, even if this just resonates with you a little bit, because there are varying degrees of codependency. It is so important to talk with a therapist. I talked with one therapist in the last 2 years, and she told me to stop using the term codependency because it was outdated from the 80s. So she really just didn't realize how codependency is used. So it's important to find a therapist who's familiar with the concept. And also on my Instagram page, it's at Overcoming Codependency. Tomorrow I'm going to post maybe 5 or 6 of the most influential books about codependency and my recovery journey.
I think that'd be an awesome idea, yeah.
So it's interesting coming from a Christian perspective of Christian codependence recovery compared to a secular perspective. The world really is saying that codependency is self-love deficiency disorder. That's actually what they've renamed it. So the cure for codependency, they would say, is to love yourself better.
Wait, hold on. Say that all over again just so people can hear that again.
So basically, the world's perspective of codependency is just that it's self-love deficiency disorder. Like, you need to love yourself better in order to overcome this mindset of, meeting everyone's needs and neglecting your own.
Okay.
So, but the Christian perspective on that would be surrendering to God and not trying to control or let people experience the consequences of their actions, and really just surrendering it all to the Lord instead of trying to control the outcome. And that was really a summary of my journey of the past year and a half.
Isn't that a contradiction if people in the secular world say it's self-love deficiency so you can control it? I mean, are they saying that, like, isn't control one of the things about codependency where it seems like it'd be more healthy to kind of give it up to the Lord than to try to say, I'm going to try to control this and get myself to a healthy point by doing this, and this.
Yeah, well, it does take intentional work, and that's what I've realized. It takes intentionally making decisions in order to move on my recovery journey. But the difference with me is that I can surrender it to the Lord, and that I'm trusting Him on this journey and not trying to control the circumstances around me.
So you talked about earlier how you faced some trauma in 2007. So when did you start to kind of face codependency head on and realize that this is something that I need to deal with and this is something that I can't keep burying down?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Jay's grandma sent him a book called 9 Things You Simply Must Do to Succeed in Life and Love by Henry Cloud. And I was reading that book and I just kept underlining and highlighting and writing in the margins, and so much of it resonated with me. And it was nice because I trusted it from a Christian perspective, but yet it was challenging me in these areas regarding boundaries. And one sentence that really stood out to me that I underlined was, they have kept someone happy but lost their own way. And for me, that's where I was. And another one was, you get what you tolerate. And it just made me realize that I had been...
I love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Isn't that
honestly love
powerful?
that one. Yeah, I do.
And I'd been tolerating too much dysfunction, imbalance.
So what year was this at this point?
This was August of 2016 when I started reading this book and making changes.
So it was like
personally.
9 years that you had been struggling with all of this before it kind of like smacked you in the face.
Yeah. And I think that's how a codependency journey can be, because it's kind of like you're surviving, barely keeping your head above water, and then slowly you're going further and further under. And so it really got to the point where I was feeling like I was drowning before I would face the reality of how I felt and what I was dealing with.
Okay, so you said this was 2016.
Yes.
So, yeah, where did you go from there? What happened next?
So then in 2017 in the spring, we talked about this in Jay's podcast, but he was hospitalized and struggling, and I still wasn't honest with myself about what was going on.
Why do you think? I mean, were you afraid to face it, or were you still in the mode where, okay, I realize that there's something going on that I need to face, but I got to take care of Jay?
I think it just feels too big. I just felt like there's no way that I could change this dynamic, and so it just felt like
almost
too
like
overwhelming.
this is how it's been for however many years at this point. This is how our marriage is. This is how our relationship is, and this is just how it's going to be.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then in November, Jay was traveling in Africa, and I was just really struggling personally, dealing with some pain that was rising in my heart. And when Jay got home, I said that I really felt like we needed to go to counseling. And I remember hearing Ron Moore speak in Job about our pain. Is it just a misery to be endured, or will we offer it to God for His redemptive purposes? And the Lord just used those messages from Job to draw that out of my heart. Then in 2018, Jay was hospitalized again. And for the first time, I wasn't in denial. I was going to counseling, so I had that support. And I just felt like I had to really draw a line and say, I can't do this. I can't carry the weight. Instead of controlling the outcome, as I carefully did the year before when he was hospitalized, I just had to be honest.
So in my mind, when you say that, like when you talked about when Jay was first hospitalized and how you kind of cared for him and you were in denial, I feel like that's how I would have responded too.
Yeah.
So like that's the right way,
Right.
almost to respond to someone in that situation. So hearing that the next time you're like, no, like I'm not okay. This isn't okay for us.
Right.
And you drew a line is so powerful because even like me personally, like I wouldn't see that as an issue.
Right.
And
Right.
that
Finding
makes
that strength, I mean, that's huge. I mean, for you to find the strength, because just a year ago you were saying this is how our relationship is. This is too big.
Right.
But for you to find the strength to finally say it's not too big.
Yeah.
We need to face this head on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to describe that time when Jay's hospitalized. I'm saying, no, you can't come home. He ends up going to live with his parents. I couldn't eat. I struggled even just to sip broth. I was just barely keeping my head above water. I mean, my family poured out love to me. My friends surrounded me and walked through this fire with me. But it was a low. And one thing that my mentor told me at the time, she really said, this is grief. Something has died and we don't know what yet.
That is such I love that. I hate to say I love that, but I love that because it is powerful.
It's so real.
And that's exactly what it is. Like a part of how your marriage was, or a part of how Jay was, or a part of how you were.
Yeah.
It had to die, though.
Right.
It had to die for you guys to be well and take it to the next step.
Right.
Yeah.
And at that point, I really did have to just surrender the outcome. And literally, it felt like the Lord was just holding me. I mean, those verses, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you, from Isaiah 43. I had this just analogy in my mind at the time, like that God was just, I had no hold left and he was carrying me. And it even made me think, if we were walking through a deep river with one of my children, my hold onto them would not depend on their hold onto me. I would have them. And my Father God showed that to me during that time, that I had no strength left, but he is the one, even when it was pitch black from every side, literally just meeting him through this Charles Spurgeon, these readings that I was reading at the time, and just him lighting the way, literally one step at a time, one breath at a time, getting through that crisis.
I personally think, Becca, that I need to jump in here and say that to speak to the people to encourage the people that are codependent, that there's hope, but I want to ask you, tell us about the story, about how, just continue to tell us about the struggle and how you get better. Because I'm just saying this. I'm just saying that people that are like me, and I say, and so like your mentor said she is codependent, recovering for 40 years. So that would be you, right? So I guess, what would you call me? The dependent one? You're the codependent, I'm the dependent. Is that how it works or something?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm the dependent one. And I have those tendencies, like I catch myself, me and Becca talk about this. I've actually been talking about it lately, about how I can easily slide back into that lifestyle because Becca will naturally slide back into that.
Right.
lifestyle.
It's a job. It's a daily job for you to stay on, both of you. For anybody that's diagnosed or a support person, it is a daily job to stay on track with the direction you're supposed to be going.
Absolutely. But it's so funny that I never get hurt by codependency.
Right.
You only gain from it.
I gain from it.
Yeah.
I mean, Becca will go, I guess we need to do this and this and this. And just like she had done for, I think, 14, 15 years at that point, she was just doing everything for me, you know? And so I never saw that as bad. I never...
Because it was all about you, Jay.
I mean, right? And so when you're out there, if you're struggling, Beck, maybe like make sure that you hit on this, because for the people that are out there, and I know you got a lot of followers that are interested in your story, and God's given you a platform, which is really cool, you know? And maybe you should just really make it clear about how you get to health when somebody like myself doesn't want to change.
Right. There's a Henry Cloud quote, and it says, "I'm not doing this to you, I'm doing it for me." So you really have to get to the point where you're not making a decision based on if it pleases the other person, or also recognizing that dynamic, that what I need to do and what your response is going to be are two separate issues. Yes, I need to deal with what I need to do. Yes, I need to navigate how I'm going to handle your feelings and my feelings, but not make one decision based on the other. So Jay was living with his parents, and I was at home with the kids, and I homeschool, but I was having trouble breath by breath. So I put the kids in school, and I was really thinking they would end up being in school for the next year as well. So I was wanting to prepare them a little bit.
Hold on. Not to interject. So
That's fine.
So your kids were homeschooled, and because you and Jay was off in Ohio, and you decided you needed to get well.
Right.
So you put your kids into public school. Is that what you're saying?
It was actually a Christian school. But
Okay.
Yes, it was a place where we knew a lot of people there. And that's what
Cornerstone. It's cool. You know, they were like so good to us.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, what a blessing.
yeah, I love those people over there.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And if we started naming names, I would forget people, so I won't do that. But they're really good.
Yeah.
So basically, at this point, how many? No longer homeschooling. I need to be well. I need to kind of work through this.
Right.
So your kids went to Cornerstone. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to understand that.
Right. And it was basically us taking time, needing to get healthy separate, because our dynamic together wasn't healthy. It was a dysfunctional cycle between the codependent and with Jay's, some of his behavioral addiction type personality traits. With
I can't even
borderline.
imagine, though, the strength and the courage and everything that you must have had when you had that conversation with Jay and you said you need to leave.
Yeah.
What was that? Did you do that? Was that in a letter?
Well, I went and met with our pastor and talked with him. And then I came to the hospital and talked with you there. And that was the main conversation where we had it.
Really, really, man, we could spend so long on this, because this is when when we were really struggling. I do remember being in the psych ward, and Becca didn't come in and just go, "Hey, how are you?" You know, and like,
Right.
she came in like,
This is how it's going to be.
yeah, and like, okay, you know, and she was.
I can't even imagine the pep talk you were probably giving yourself walking in the hallway leading up to Jay's
Well,
room.
it was,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't, it's probably not how we're making it out, because she was crying, you know.
Right.
It wasn't like she's getting in there like, you got to go. You know? As Karen would say. She wasn't doing that, but she was through tears. And
But still
and
the
putting her foot down.
strength, yeah.
And I could feel it.
Right.
You know, and then we went to, I'll just throw it out too. We went to Ron Moore, who has just been a spiritual hero of mine, you know, working at the Bible chapel,
Right.
you know, and I mean, you know, and
We poured everything out to them, to Pastor Ron and Pastor Tom.
yep, and Tom
We
was
laid
there.
it
We
all
have
out.
Tom Rojan from the Bible chapel has stuck with us through thick and thin as our campus pastor. But yeah, and that whole thing, that was a whole dynamic that was really, that helped me understand a little bit. It wasn't my turning point, because I was still really hard-hearted, but in the end, that was probably the first moment when Ron Moore, Pastor Ron Moore, said something that was like, he said something. I'm purposely being vague. He said something, and I was just like, whoa, like, this is serious. We're in a serious spot. And I still didn't respond well, because it was hard to hear.
Right.
But and man, I and that's when, and you know what? Out of this whole thing, I'm just going to throw this out too, and maybe I'll cut this. But this is when, for me and Becca, life got very real because we were at the Bible chapel and probably a lot of people thought that we were, the youth pastor and youth pastor wife, and life was
Right.
Life was good. We got 5 kids and whatnot.
Right.
And then,
Perfect little family.
Yeah. And then we're in there with Ron Moore and, Tom Rajan. And I became, they weren't judging me because they're good guys, but, all my crap came out.
Right.
There,
they saw a whole other side of Jay.
Yeah. And I apologized. I was like, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about me that's going to let you down.
Right.
And it's horrible to this day, and so, but things were very real,
So, okay. So Jay goes off to Ohio, your kid starts going to school, and then you're able to really focus on what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, I was just still in that breath by breath, and friends bringing me meals, and really just barely keeping my head above water, to be honest. But it was dysfunctional between Jay and I. I was trying to have clear boundaries and recognize where I end and he begins, and that dynamic, you didn't like it. You weren't used to it.
No. I have that personality where it's not even tied into my personality. Is if you tell me to go right, I'm going to go left. Like I'm a fighter, just my personality.
Happier podcast, #rebel. Enough said.
So I have that. Then you add in the whole codependency thing and the mental illness thing. And there were times that I treated Becca worse than, I don't know.
Worse than you should.
That's a polite way to say it.
Yes. So you're in Ohio. Becca's back at home with the kids. Then a family member of yours commits suicide, which we talked about, Jay, in your story. But I'm bringing that up just because Becca and Jay, that's kind of like when I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's when the two of you kind of came back together. You both said, we love each other. We want our marriage to work. We want to figure this out, and we need to work through this together.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. Well, it was when he was gone for the first month or so, there was not any healthy communication between us. And then a couple weeks before that tragic death, I noticed a shift where Jay was beginning to take responsibility for his mental health. Up to then, he was saying, I don't have borderline personality disorder. I have a counselor that told me I don't have it, so I don't think I do. And instead, you met with a professional who confirmed that you did, and you were really wanting to face that. So that I felt hopeful in seeing you take responsibility for your mental health. And then when that happened with your family member, that was, we actually were spending time together at your parents' for the first time, and it had been 7 weeks at that point. So that just gave us an opportunity to talk.
There's so much that we could say about this, and you could listen to my story. And I don't want to take the time away from Becca's story, but this is when I realized that Becca was not like a lead ball or a bowling ball that you could throw against the wall and nothing's going to happen to it.
Right.
I realized it was a glass ball that was, like, I don't know anything about like glass, but isn't Tiffany like a real famous like Tiffany glass or something? I don't know.
Isn't that crystal?
Is that crystal? I don't
know.
I'm just thinking whatever it is.
It was delicate.
It's delicate, super delicate, and priceless. Like
Right.
maybe like not even on top of like just delicate. It's like there's something about it that's priceless. And for some reason that just got into my head, and I was like, oh, I've been treating Becca like she is a lead ball.
Right.
And it's so interesting because I was allowing that. I was not allowing you to reap what you were sowing, in our relationship. So once I did, you realized that right? I was a glass ball that could be shattered because I was actually following through on consequences.
Just think about how much our marriage, the 15 years of our marriage, would be different if it was like we went on our honeymoon and we came home and I'm like, slept in, you did the dishes, and then you're like, you got to get out of bed.
Well, that's what a healthy person would say.
Yeah, that's what a healthy person would say.
14 years. I mean, Jay would sleep in every single day till 10 minutes before he had to go to work, and I never said anything. And I just, wherever there was a gap, I filled it in with a smile, which looks loving, but it's dishonest. I was upset about it. I wasn't communicating assertively to you. That's something I've done in my recovery. Taken assertiveness classes with my counselor. I mean, just very intentional with developing some of those skills.
So where are you today?
Well, when you first came home last May, I remember you saying that you wanted to be in boot camp for 6 months. And that helped me. All of a sudden, I felt like, okay, he wants to be committed to change, because I had, in some ways, I felt like I've heard this before, and Henry Cloud says that love is unconditional, but trust is earned. And I really had my guard up. We had separate bedrooms for 6 months. We really lived side by side, but we were in a season of recovering. And for you to be open to want to handle life well. So it started with 6:30 coffee.
Yeah, I make coffee for Becca now at 6:30. I don't sleep in, right?
So you're telling me when we meet at like 7:30, 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning for a podcast, that is like difficult.
Yeah, I hate it. That's why I think last time I had a Coke and a coffee too. Both. But yeah, so I had to be forced to be different. I mean, Becca. I mean, I just got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to see my kids. Our relationship will end. And when that hits you, and along with understanding that our relationship is like a glass ball or whatever, it's precious and delicate. When all those things start coming to your head, you act different. But that'll never change if the codependent person like yourself doesn't put their foot down and go, I ain't doing it anymore.
Right.
And it's going to suck after that.
Right. It's going to
be work.
Right. When you draw those boundaries, it's going to get harder before you feel that sense of freedom. But when you get to the point where you want to face into it because you want to feel whole again, because you want to feel freedom, then it's time to face this pain.
I can say, just me sitting here listening to this story and just knowing you, both of you, for a very short time, this is amazing to just sit here and just process. If you listen to Jay's story and you're now hearing Becca's story, to process what they've been through as a team, as a husband and wife, as a couple, as parents. And to see them today, and I'm sure there's still a road ahead of them and there's still work to be done, mm-hmm. but just to see the two of you today, praise God. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable.
So right now it is the end of February 2019. We're coming up on probably like almost a year anniversary from a lot of things that were pretty heavy in our life, and God has been really good to us. And we're sitting here and loving each other, and the relationship.
I'm gonna cry.
I know it
beautiful.
Is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And this is gonna sound silly, but for my last words, because I'm gonna give it to Becca and let her end it. But my last words are to the people that are codependent like Becca. You gotta stop and not do the things that you used to do, or it's not going to change. Here's an example. I went to boot camp for 6 months.
No, you didn't.
No, not really boot camp.
Oh, Okay.
Like
I'm like,
boot
what?
camp as in learning how to do life.
I'm like, that's a whole other podcast.
Learning how to do life again in the right way.
All right, I'm with you.
And I did that for 6 months. And like I said, I think earlier in the podcast, I can go back into those ways, and so can Becca. And an example of that is we have this trash can up in our bathroom, in our master bathroom, and I looked down at it the other day, and I was like, I got to take that out, And literally, I'm 39, and I'm just sharing how honest I am, or how I'm being honest about how screwed up I am. At 39, 5 kids, all the things I've done, all the places I've worked and whatnot, I'm still learning that I have to take the trash out. I'm going, why didn't Becca take that trash out? It's over.
Please tell me you took the trash out.
I did. I did later on. It needs to. Although I saw it again tonight, and it still needs to go out again. It's like that. It's the never-ending trash can, but it's because it's like a 10 inches tall. But anyway, but I will go back into that.
Right. It's easy to do.
You just go right back into it, and so I just want to encourage people. And then Becca, I want to give you the last word. I just want to give people, even though it sounds, even though I want to protect my people out there. The people that are the jerks, the people that are that were like me.
Right. They're like, I'm loving life. This is great.
Yeah. I mean, you want to protect me. You want to go, yeah, I thought the same thing. But I've gotten to at least a point of health to say, man, get healthy and draw a hard line with things, and it's going to suck for a while. It's going to be really tough because really your husband or your wife or somebody, they're not going to like it, and it's going to be crazy, but it's going to lead you to health. So Becca, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah, sounds good. I think it's easy, even in a situation like the example that you just gave, to look at, it looks like the obvious dysfunctional person would be the person who didn't take the trash out for X many years or didn't handle their weight of responsibilities. But just as we've been talking about, the codependency side of that is, why did I allow that? Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I draw the line sooner? And I'm just thankful that I have now and am experiencing the freedom in that. And it's not perfect, but we really are being refined in this process. And in some areas, it feels like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but we're growing and we're moving forward. And for me personally, I'm learning to be assertive and honest. And to be honest, for a little while last year, I would let my assertiveness shoot straight to anger because I had been quiet for so long. But now I'm working on that too. But for those of you who this resonates with, this concept of codependency and this need to fill in the gap around you, regardless of whether it's your responsibility or not, I want to encourage you. There's a specific study called the Christian Codependence Recovery Workbook by Stephanie Tucker, and that's been the most solid resource that I recommend to people. And another book, 9 Things You Simply Must Do to Succeed in Life and Love by Henry Cloud. I've recommended that a couple times. I also have an Instagram account called Overcoming Codependency, and you can feel free to leave me a message there or check out any of my posts there. I would love to recommend more books, and specifically though, finding a therapist who recognizes codependency and even specializes in it has made a big difference for me. So lastly, I just want to leave you with this verse, Isaiah 48:10 and 11. I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. I have refined you in the furnace of suffering. I will rescue you for my sake.
Thanks for listening today. Again, we have tried hard to share truth authentically, and we hope that this has been a helpful time in your life. To reach us, donate, share your story, and give us feedback on how we can do a better job reaching people that are struggling. Please go to www.c50hope.com.
We leave you with this.
Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. And remember, as Jack Miller said, you're far more loved than you ever dare imagine.